Hey, everybody, welcome to the next episode of State of the Pels. We have got a very special guest on today. David Grubb is joining us. Thank you so much for being on today.
Glad to be with you.
Thanks. Well, it is a special day. We've got the Pelicans schedule, and it's 82 glorious games, and we're going to see what's going to happen this year. I want to say before we even get into the schedule, I love the video that the Pelicans posted online as they were releasing the schedule. I like that they just addressed the Pels are cursed and everybody's injured, but we're reversing the curse, hopefully. I think that says a lot about what Joe Dumars is wanting to bring into the program now and hold everybody accountable to doing all they can to hopefully prevent any injuries. But let's get into the schedule a little bit. First thought, what do you think about it?
I think the most important thing is to look at the start, of the season for the Pelicans. That has been such an indicator over this franchise's history about how they're going to do. When they make the playoffs, typically they get off to good starts. In the 9 seasons that the Pelicans have made the playoffs, the Hornets/Pelicans over their history, they've usually gotten off to about a 6 or 7 wins in their first 10 games. Under Willie Green has been much more of a challenge. I think they've averaged just over 3 wins in their first 10 games for Willie over the first 4 years. So when you look at the schedule, and it is a difficult schedule to start the year, how the Pelicans start is going to be so important. And I think you don't want to fall behind in a Western Conference that is probably 13 teams deep as we get ready to start the season.
Yes, you're so right about that. I think one thing I hate to say this because I don't want to jinx anything, but everybody's healthy right now with the exception of DeJounte Murray. So I'm kind of glad that the schedule does start out tough for us because we do have everybody healthy. Maybe that's going to help us, get off on the right foot with the healthy guys against some really good competition. Do you think that's a possibility?
It certainly is if you're healthy and you come out of the gates fast, if Zion Williamson is ready to go, if Trey Murphy's ready to go. I think you look at the Pelicans starting 5, and as a starting 5, they can compete with most teams, if not every team in the West when you look at just the 1 through 5. I think the issue for the Pelicans is always going to be, and it has been since Zion Williamson got to New Orleans, is what does the depth look like on the bench? And so I think if your starters are healthy, you can play them more minutes early on. You can, and get them, you don't have to go as deep into the bench early on because everybody's fresh and ready to go. So if those guys are ready to compete out of the gate, you're going to rely on them a lot in the beginning, but certainly you're hoping that while other teams are still figuring out, because everybody's gone through a lot of changes this offseason, you're hoping that while teams are still trying to figure it out, that maybe you've got some opportunities to catch people while they're slipping and steal some wins here and there. And that's what you're going to have to do because there's so many road games in particular. Early on, you have that 7-game road stretch, and I think that could be a really key part of the season really early.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about that. I think it's interesting. We've just got the 2 home games in October for the whole month, and those games are a few days apart, starting on the 24th and then 27th. But that's against the Spurs and Boston. So that's going to be 2 fun home games right there. And then, like you said, they go on the road for they've got 7 on the road right after that. So it's going to be a tough stretch. But let's say best case scenario, the Pelicans, what would be the best case scenario, would you say, from a record standpoint over those first stretch of 10 to 15 games?
I think you've got to be hanging around 500. If you can be 8-7 after 15 games, 7-8, you're still in it. You know what I mean? You can't be lower than that. If you come out of gate and you're 5-10, you're putting yourself in a real hole. And you've got to start putting together win streaks. And what do we know is that this team, even when it's been at its best, the longest winning streak of Willie Green's career is 7 games. So you're not a team that's expected to win 10, 12 games in a row. So you just can't afford those kind of lulls out of the gate. But I think if this team, considering again the amount of youth that it has, we have to remember this is like the 4th youngest team, I think, in the NBA. You're in that group. So as young as they are, if they can be 8-7, 9-6 after 15 games, I think then you start getting yourself some momentum, some belief. The fans are in it because that means you've won some games against some tough teams. Out of the gate, you've shown that you can compete on the defensive end because you're going to get tested by some very good offensive teams early. So I think you give a lot of optimism to the players in the locker room first and foremost. That's who needs to be encouraged. These guys need to believe that this is different for themselves. And I think the fan base, who will be in a wait-and-see approach by and large, I think the first couple of games, seeing if there is a difference in the feel to this organization, you give them a lot of reason to come in and show up when you start putting together these 5-game homestands, and you want that arena packed, and you want people to be optimistic. So I think just give them optimism early. Don't fall into a tank early. Just give people a reason to believe. Because I think if you get to 43, 44 wins, you're in a good position. And that's a lot of improvement from one year to the next.
Yeah, huge improvement. And I think that the team knows that. They know we can't start slow like we have. We have to give people a reason to believe, or else they're just immediately going to be like, okay, forget it. We're the same that we were last year. I don't really see how a healthy team, Pelicans team, like you said, with the starting 5, I don't see how they could just fall apart completely and not get off to a strong start. Barring, like last year, what happened with DeJounte Murray, right in the very beginning of the season, like barring some injury right off the bat, I just don't see how this team can't put together very competitive and some big wins in those first 15 games to start off. And I think that there's a lot of hope there with it. What are some of the matchups that you're really looking forward to early on with the Pelicans?
I think it's those teams that you look at. Memphis, obviously a team that's in your division that you want to compete well. San Antonio in your first home game, another team in your division. And I think they both those first 2 games give you a great indicator, because those are 2 very different play styles. When you get Memphis is going to want to run constantly. You know that. And then when you get San Antonio, you're dealing with size. And I think those first 2 games, just right out of the box, will tell you a lot about this team. One, because the Pelicans have to run to be successful this season. So if you can run with Memphis and limit them in transition, that's going to be a good indicator for a team that was not great in transition defense last year. And then against San Antonio, immediately what you're getting tested is, can this team close off possessions on the defensive glass? Can they get second chances on the offensive glass? And can they remain disciplined? Because what San Antonio is going to do is they're going to try to execute you to death. And so I think those are 2 really good games early on. You get teams like Portland. That's a game you have to win against a team like Portland. The teams that are going to be at your level. When you play the Clippers, a team that you've had relative success against over the last 4 years with Willie Green, you've been generally successful against the Clippers, no matter who they've had on the court. So that's a team that you've got to do well against. I look at those matchups. I don't care about the Boston one in the East, because that's a team, you only play them twice. You want to split. If you can split, great. But there's so many Western games loaded up early. Denver on the road. Like, I think all of these matchups, you're playing so many playoff teams, you're going to get a really good idea of where this team is early. And if there needs to be player personnel changes on that second unit, then Joe Dumars is going to know really quickly with this team, and they're going to have to be aggressive in doing that. Because I think, again, the starting lineup, not a lot of concern if they're healthy. But the bench is the biggest question mark for this team.
Yeah, you make a really good point with that. I completely agree. With those first early on games, like you're saying, against playoff teams, we've got to win the games that we have to win, like that we should win. And then you've got to steal a couple of victories from some of these teams that, obviously we struggled against most everybody last season, but some of these teams that are already established as teams that are going to be in the playoff run, for sure. You've talked about the starting 5, no concerns with that. And I've heard so many different opinions. What do you think the starting 5 is going to be?
I think, this is considering that DeJounte Murray probably won't be available to at the earliest would be late December. Like, we got to remember, 9 months would be really cutting it tight. Really, but if we're talking about it's closer to a year, and that'd be late January, early February. But I think if we're the way we're looking at it today, it's Jordan Poole is starting at the point guard, Herb Jones at the 2, Trey at the 3, Zion at the 4. And I think it would be today, I would say it'd be Kevon Looney starting, but I think Yves Missi plays the most minutes. And the reason I say that Looney starts is because it is so critical for the Pelicans to get off to good defensive starts. And as good as Yves was last year, he's still learning defensively. He was one of the lower rated defensive players on the Pelicans, 21st on the team in net on the defensive end. So when you look at that part, if you start with Kevon, who's only going to play probably about 22 to 24 minutes a night if they're handling this properly. If Kevon is giving you heavy minutes at the beginning, it sets the tone physically. Then you allow Yves to come in and handle the longer stretches of the game. But for Kevon, I think it's really important on the back end of the defense to be able to be that last line to start games as your backcourt learns to play together. Because we got to remember, Jordan Poole and Herb Jones have not played a single minute of basketball together, and they have to be on the same page at the point of attack defensively. So while you're getting them to where they need to be, I think Kevon Looney is your best option as the starting center.
That's one thing I am interested to see is Poole has not played with this group. So far, we've got all these talented guys who have played together here and there, but then they keep getting hurt. But Jordan is a completely new addition to this. So I am interested to see, how much work are they putting in the off season so that they get comfortable and start to understand everyone's style of play and see what kind of impact he can make out there. I do feel great about him being able to run the floor. Like you said, we're going to need to have that. That's one thing I feel like Missy probably is going to be a little bit better at than Looney is running the floor. So it will be interesting to see what kind of, I do see Missy getting more minutes, but it will be interesting to see if Looney does start, then does Missy eventually get the start? It's just going to really depend on how much he's grown, but obviously Looney's got this, we have a young team, but he's a veteran in the league, so it's going to be like great to have that presence out there as well. One thing I feel like with this team at this point is that they kind of have a chip on their shoulder. Because here's the deal. It's one thing to just not be a really, really great, I don't know how to explain this. It's one thing to have the talent, but you can't show it because you're hurt. It's another thing if you're just an average player. I feel like these guys on the Pelicans know that they're above average players and they just haven't been able to show what they can really do. And I feel like this year they're just determined beyond anything that they have to stay healthy. I know you can't always prevent an injury, but I just feel like it's such a priority this year. These guys are just ready to show what they're actually capable of. They're sick of all the negative and, the record last year and all. What are you feeling? What's kind of the vibe that you're getting?
I think big thing is going to be how Dumars approaches this season with the players, because I think we all have the impression, and there wasn't much evidence to suggest otherwise, that David Griffin had his thumb on the scales when it came to how players played their games, and whether or not they could play. And Zion talked about it as if I could play back-to-backs, I would, but I work for the Pelicans and they say no back-to-backs. Well, Joe Dumars comes from an era where you played back-to-backs. Joe Dumars comes from an era where you were expected to show up for 75, 80 games a season. Joe Dumars is a guy who believes in players being workmanlike no matter what their talent level is. So I think when he hears about a bite or bump or a bruise, in his opinion, no matter what the training staff says, unless they're saying that you cannot put him on the floor. If he doesn't hear that, like, Joe, don't let him play. If he doesn't hear that, he's gonna be like, let him go out there. If he can't go, he'll tell us. But put him out there. And I think that is a huge thing for players, because by and large, I believe most players want to play. I believe that most players want to be given the opportunity to play. And if they've been told that, hey, it's not in your best interest to be at anything less than your best. But I think that when you look at, when we talk about greatness for any of these players, and Zion Williamson and Chris Connor said this on our platform, and I think you would agree too. If we're talking about talent for talent, Zion Williamson is among the 5 to 10 most talented players in the NBA. Trey Murphy is definitely in the top 10 small forward conversation if he reaches his potential. He's an all-star, if not an all-NBA talent at that point. Herb Jones is the guy who could win a Defensive Player of the Year award. So you have guys who in their careers, their talent level and their talent should have earned them more recognition, but they have not been available. Trey's only played 104 games, something like that, the last 2 seasons. Herb's missed games last season. Zion's missed all these games. But yeah, for all of them, they've reached the point in their careers that if you don't start getting the accolades now, if you don't start showing the league that you are an elite player now at your mid-20s, then you're never going to get it, because the next wave is coming. And those guys are going to start stealing the thunder. So I think, yeah, if you're Zion Williamson, if you're Trey Murphy, if you're Herb Jones, if you're Jordan Poole, who's been written off now twice, right. You know what I mean? So all of these guys, yeah, you've got something that you need to come in and prove. And then also, because of the coaching situation and how that's viewed, you've got to also prove that you are coach proof. Mm-hmm. That coaching is not anything that's holding you back or anything like. You're good enough to do whatever, whenever, and that's a burden for these guys to carry. But I think if you're a competitor, it's a burden you want to carry.
Right. I think that the pressure that they feel is it's a good thing for them. It's they're ready. I think they've been in the league long enough. They're not, they're not that young. I mean, it's great. So I have a lot of hope, and I know I'm always very positive about the team overall. But I know that they're talented. It's not just like, this is an average team and let's just hope they're going to surprise everybody. No, they're literally that good. They just can't seem to stay healthy. But I like what you said about Willie Green. He knows that this is it. Like, he has to prove it now. So hopefully everybody's coming together. They're like, we're going to find a way to make this happen. But I just think it'd be great for the city. I don't know how the Saints are going to be this year, but if we got a good Pelicans team, like you said, filling up the arena, everyone watching the games, checking it out. I mean, the city needs a winning team at some point. Like, we haven't really had that in a long time. So I'm hoping that this is the year. Fingers crossed.
I am so tired of the national discourse about, and I don't understand why the focus is always on New Orleans about whether this is a basketball town or not. Nobody says that about Atlanta. And I know if you've ever been to Atlanta for a basketball game, it ain't full. So if you go to Charlotte, it ain't full. Like, what are you talking about? When the Pelicans win, the arena's full. They got to win, and all Pelicans fans are asking for it. I don't think even if I think this would be fine for you, right? If you got 10 years of straight playoff appearances like the Memphis Grizzlies did, like Portland did, even if you don't get a championship, if you give me 10 straight years of the playoffs, get to the conference semifinals a couple times, get to the conference finals once or twice, if you do that over a decade, Pelicans fans will be with you forever. That's all we're asking for. If you win a championship, we know how hard it is to win a championship. There are franchises who've been around for 30, 50, 70 years that don't have titles. But the Pelicans fans just want competency. Give us consistent competency, and people will be fine.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. Just win overall, like, give us a winning record, get us to the playoffs. We will be as happy as can be with that. And they have the ability to do it this year, barring some disaster. So, hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing happens that's bad. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate your time. I always enjoy talking to you. It's always great to talk to, fellow Pelicans fans. So I really appreciate you coming on. You're welcome anytime. Just let me know. So thank you so much. All right, everybody. Talk to you later. We'll have another episode coming out soon. Appreciate y'all joining in, and we will see you next time.